Hey guys, I'm back, and in today's video I want to go through with you how to determine fair value of real estate. I have 4 methods plus one at the end that investors would surely love. These are the methods that I've gone through time and time again to help my clients buy property at fair value. And I'm proud to say that till date, not a single one of them has paid overvalue for property. So if you're like me or you're like any of my clients and hate paying above value for real estate, you'll love this video. Now, keep watching. The first way is to get an indicative valuation for the property. No, I'm not talking about the ones that cost you hundreds of dollars to engage a professional valuer to come down and do a 10-page report for your property. I'm talking about the bank's indicative valuation. Yes, this is the valuation that banks can provide to potential buyers to give buyers an idea of how much they can loan for this property. How do you get this bank's indicative valuation? It's quite simple. All you need to do is to ask your professional real estate agent to get this valuation for you, as they would be working with a lot of bankers and they have a certain relationship that can enable them to ask them for this valuation. Well, to elaborate a bit further, how does the bank get this indicative valuation? There are 2 types. The first is for new launch properties. For new launch real estate, typically the banks have no problems matching the valuation to the developer's asking price. This is because most of the projects in Singapore, the banks already have a tie-up with the developers where they decide on the selling prices together. The second and a bit more tricky indicative valuation is for resale property. Why do I say so? Because for resale property, the focus and the basis of banks' indicative valuation is usually from past transacted prices. That means as a resale seller, you can't sell your property too high from the previous transacted prices in the development without having the buyer to pay cash over valuation. And that's a big reason why the first method, the bank's indicative valuation, shouldn't be the only basis of valuation that we use, as the valuation given by banks may not be the same across different banks and can also differ by a few hundreds of thousands. That's not a small sum, and therefore we need to look at the second method as well, which is to use the land valuation. The land valuation is more for new launch properties where you can determine how fair is the developer's selling price to the original cost. Therefore, this is broken into 2 segments. The first, I call it 2A, would be cost-based, and the second, I would call it 2B, comparative-based. For the first 2A, cost-based, it's simple and it's something that you may have heard multiple times by sales agents in the show flats. All you do is to take the land price, you add the cost to develop, the building cost, you add the marketing cost to get what is known as the developer's break-even pricing. The idea here is that the closer the developer is selling you the property to the break-even pricing, the fairer the price is, because it's based on the cost price. Anything that they mark up is the developer's profit margin and is where you can be considered to be overpaying for the property. Still, you can't take the cost approach on its own, as sometimes the property values can jump quicker than what the developer first purchased the land for. Therefore, the second part we use is the comparative-based approach. And for this comparative-based approach, you look at different land plots in similar or comparable areas. For example, Project A has a land cost of 800 PSF per plot ratio, and Project B that is in a very similar location has a land cost of 500 per square feet per plot ratio. In this scenario, if Project A would be selling at the same price as Project B, it can be fair to say that Project A is undervalued, given that the land bids for Project A was higher than Project B, and therefore being in a very similar location, it should technically be selling at a higher price. Another way that you can use land valuation to compare properties sold across different times is to use the land price at the time the developer bought and the land price being sold today. For example, if in 2016 a land was bid by a developer at 1000 PSF per plot ratio, that was in 2016, about 3 years ago. The project has been selling steadily today, but the general thought in the market was that it's too expensive. Fast forward to today, 2019, a similar land has sold at the same price, 1000 per square feet per plot ratio. Now, the first property in 2016 suddenly becomes fair value. Comparing based on land valuation is a very complicated topic, and I'll probably leave the full details to another video, but I hope this is a good enough start for you right now. The third is a location surrounding properties approach. For example, the property you're looking at, property A, you would compare the current selling price against other real estate properties that are transacting near to it. B, C, D, E, F, and G. It may not always be a straightforward comparison, as sometimes you may be comparing properties of different ages. Some may be freehold, others may be leasehold. But here's some rule of thumb approaches. First, for leasehold comparisons, you can take the recent transacted pricing, let's call it X, divided by the number of years left in that property, let's say it's 80 years left, multiplied by the number of years of the brand new condominium that's being sold. Say it's 99. This figure you get Y shouldn't be very far away from the developer's asking price. As for freehold property, it's a bit more tricky as I can't just use the number of lease as a guide. In that case, you really have to look for comparables, comparable freeholds within the vicinity, and focus on two things. One, the per square feet, and two, the total quantum. As a rule of thumb, if you are considering new properties, the per square feet and the total quantum shouldn't be more than 20% of the equivalent resale property. And what if you just cannot find any comparables in the vicinity? Don't be afraid to go further away to other locations, E, F, Y, Z, anything, anywhere across the island to find something that would be a reasonable comparison. One example I can give you are integrated developments. When looking at properties that are part of integrated developments, you can easily have a gauge on the value and what people is willing to pay for them by comparing them against other real estate that are part of integrated developments as well. Here we arrive to the last method, my favorite and also the investor's favorite. It's called the income approach. Or if you have finance knowledge, you may also know it as the net present value method. Investors love this as it takes into account the cash flows that the property would generate until the year that you would sell it at an expected price. Sounds complicated? I'll give you an example that makes it very easy to understand. Let's say today, you decide to buy a real estate for $1 million and you're not sure if that $1 million is a fair price to pay for this particular real estate. But in 5 years' time, you can predict that you can sell this property at 1.2 million. If this is a rental property, you will get rental income every year. So from years 1 to 4, let's assume you get a rental income net of expenses of 30,000 a year. In order to find the net present value of this rental income as well as the final selling price of the property, you will need to discount the numbers by something called the discount rate. What is the discount rate? Discount rate is your expected rate of return. Let's assume it's 5% per annum as I benchmark it to the returns of REITs. Another way of understanding the discount rate is to understand it as the opposite of the compounding interest. For just a quick example, a compounding interest at 5% per annum, $100 after 1 year would be 105. 105 compounded by another 5% would be 110.25. So on, so forth. When you take a discount rate of 110.25 over 2 years, you will get the same net present value, which is $100. Similarly, to illustrate this to you, I will put it into a table form. This is the income every year and the relevant discount rate. You notice that the number gets smaller as the number of years goes on, as it requires to be discounted more times before to reach today's net present value. $1 today is not the same value as $1 10 years later, wouldn't you agree? Why is this 1.23 million? Because we account for the 1.2 million selling price plus the 30,000 in cash flow received for that year. In order to get today's net present value, all we do is to multiply these numbers. These are the results, and when you add them together, you get 1.07 million. Remember, what was the price you paid for this property in the first place? $1 million. It's certainly a good entry price that will give you more than 5% returns over the next 5 years. So that's it for my tips on determining the fair value of real estate. You're now all set to go and determine whether the real estate you're looking at is fair valued. But before you go, I just want you to remember that what I've shared is just a guide and should not be followed strictly, because at the end of the day, there are many intangible factors that can determine the fair value of real estate. These include location, government transformation, transport links, amenities, schools, and many more. While you want to make sure you don't overpay for any unit, at the same time, you also do not want to miss out on a property you really like just because you're not sure of paying the value that the owner is asking for. If you have any questions on what I've presented or have a property which you'd like help with in assessing the fair value of, do feel free to leave a message in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Once again, my name is Jim Tay, and if you enjoy my videos, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you in my next video.